Hey there, wonderful listeners. Welcome to another episode of Finnovation with me, Stuart Bell, business coach and creator of the Practice Evolution and Practice Foundations business coaching programs. This session is actually a recording of one of the live events that I ran. This one was down in Melbourne, a place called Pran, which, if you're not from Melbourne, is spelt nothing like it's pronounced. And I was calling it Prahan for a period of time. But this session was one where the focus was on productivity, which I know is a big topic most of the time, but at the moment where I guess time is such a challenge for so many advice professionals out there, it's particularly useful. What this session was all about was essentially focused on that famous saying that success leaves subtle footprints, and that sometimes by analyzing how certain people achieve success, how certain business owners achieve success, you can get an understanding of some common threads. And if you've read Tim Ferriss's Tools of Titans, this will probably become very familiar to you as a concept. And it was interesting as I delivered this session, the title is as Elite Footprints. And it's funny how people react to the idea of elite. And I guess different people have different perceptions of the word. But essentially, we were trying to unpack exactly what it was about different examples of business success and where the common threads were. So we covered a lot of things such as batching and delegation and a lot more. So I hope you get a lot out of it. As always, if you really enjoyed the podcast, please just take a moment to leave a bit of feedback. It's always greatly appreciated. But with that in mind, let me step away and we'll get stuck into Elite Footprints. Let me talk about the elite thing. I'm always really mindful when you use the word elite, particularly in Australia. So people come up with a certain thing. This session was actually named 12 months ago, right? I had it in the list of things we were going to cover. And when the time came to actually roll it out, I kind of hesitated. I was like, with everything that's going on right now, is elite the right thing to do? And I was asking myself whether it was the right topic. But then a few things happened in the lead up to it that made me realize that this was exactly the session we needed to run right now. And I'm keen to show you why. But before we do, I want to start with an exercise. I want us to get to know each other. So I want everyone to stand up quickly, or slowly, entirely up to you. I'd love you to circulate around the room and just introduce yourself to a few people you haven't met. And I want you to share with them. Who were your heroes when you were growing up? Does that make sense? Wander around, talk to 3-4 people you don't know, and just say, my heroes when I was growing up was X, and my heroes Y. Off we go. A little bit of music, are you sure if that's okay? So I was wandering around, but I'd like to know, what were some heroes that popped out that people were talking about? Parents came out a lot. Yeah, parents and footy players. So who sort of said that their parents were a real inspiration for them? What was it about your parents that made them your hero?
Grandparents, it was more the time they invested.
The time they invested. Who said sports heroes? What was it about the sports heroes that you looked up to or made them? Give up. So it was the attitude and the mindset they had. I love that. Who else had it? I know we had a comic book, a couple of comic books. Someone said they liked Superman, and I said, what was it about Superman? They went, he's Superman. What more do you need to know? He's a good character, actually. I'm more of a Batman kind of person. Mainly because Batman's the only superhero with no superpowers. He's just a rich dude. That's literally it. Which you could argue is a superpower of its own. It's interesting that they say there's two ways you can find out a lot about a person. The number one thing is how they play a game, which is why anyone who plays golf will know there's a bunch of stories of people playing golf and coming off and going, not doing business with that dude, he cheats. But the other one is when you ask people who their heroes are. And I think there's two reasons. My take on it is I think we look up to people whose ability we aspire to. Like if you look up to your grandparents, my grandfather was an Olympic boxer. He boxed at the same link as Cassius Clay. He was also one of the most gentle men you'll ever meet. He ran a butcher's, had massive hands, never lost his temper. And that's the one thing I really aspire to. But I think the second thing is we deep down we want to replicate them, which I think is where the superhero thing comes from, right? It's the unbridled potential. It's interesting when I was throwing this word elite out, I think the thing which made me nervous about putting it out there is most people would think of this mob, right? The Eton, whatever they call the Oxford, sitting on the stoop with their dumb glasses and doing that sort of stuff. They got to where they are because of circumstance. Can you spot a few famous faces in there, by the way? That's Boris. Yeah. Still looking like a blonde gibbon. And anyone else? David Cameron. Up in the corner. So it goes to show you, right? And to me, that's, I think I was listening to Jordan Peterson being interviewed by Joe Rogan this morning. Whatever you think of Jordan, I don't understand why people get so angry at him, but let's not go there. He was making the point that I think there are certain elements of challenging hierarchies when people are getting there based on their position instead of merit. And I think that's the danger, because when I think about elite, I'm coming at it from the other. I think there's two definitions. One is the elite, and the other one is elite people. The people who become the best at what they are as a result of their skill set or their dedication. You know what I mean? I'm talking about these kind of people. Whatever you think of Greta Thunberg, I don't think you can deny she is probably the elite climate change voice in the world right now. Elon Musk. By all accounts, not the smartest man in the world, but the best at finding the person who is. Kate Blanchett, without doubt, I think one of the finest actors this country has ever produced. I got to see her at the Sydney Theatre Company in a one-woman play about 3 years ago. My God, that woman can just own a room. Roger Federer, not only a great player, but I think just a model for everything. J.K. Rowling, I don't think people would disagree that she's definitely the elite children's author of our generation. She's right up there with Enid Blyton. Shane Warne, there's no doubt that whatever you think of his larrikin, his ability coupled with his just attitude, incredible. Angela Merkel. I mean, I can't think of a more eminent, powerful female politician who's got there 100% based on merit. David Beckham, interesting thing about David Beckham, everyone remembers the bending thing. Beckham's actual biggest strength was the fact he had an engine that no one's ever seen before. The thing about David Beckham playing on the right is you didn't need a right back. He had the hole. Anyone know this lady down here? Leandra Ewart.
Martha.
Yeah. If you don't know about Martha, she is the Pele of females football. She is, at one point in the 2000s, she was invited to play men's professional football in Italy. And they were that far from signing off until FIFA stepped in. Personally, I would have loved to have seen it.
Yeah.
And I think the reason they didn't let her is because there's a lot of Italian players there who, the idea of being nutmegged and left for dead by someone who was just worlds ahead of everybody else would have been too embarrassing. So these are the kind of people I think about when I think about elite. I guess the reason why I wanted to do this, and the moment when I realized this had to be the topic, was I was thinking about this, and this photo popped up of a gig I did for Asteron many, many years ago with a lady called Alicia Camplin. I remember Alicia. She won a gold medal at the Winter Olympics, first woman ever to do it. She would have been the first Australian, but I think Stephen Bradbury beat her to it by about 30 minutes. And I had the opportunity to travel around Australia doing speaking gigs, and so I got to see the presentation, and I also got to talk to her afterwards. And two things became apparent in talking to her and the way that she approached it. The first thing is, before she won a gold medal, she was actually not a skier. She started out as a gymnast. And when she wasn't going to make it as a gymnast, she became a high diver. And the day she stepped on the snow, that it was the first time, 7 years before she won the gold medal, was the first time she'd ever been on snow. In other words, the sport was the vehicle for the gold medal, not the other way around. Does that make sense?
She admits that. She went searching for a sport she could do.
She totally did.
Yeah.
She actually did the numbers. She was like, what's the biggest chance I've got of getting a gold medal? She was not a skier. She is now. But the skier was just the means, totally. The other thing is, and I'll talk to you a bit about that, is the clarity of the purpose that led her to achieve that. She was very, very clear on what she wanted, and she was systematic about the way she went about it. Led me to think about a business that I'd had the opportunity to hear from when I went to San Francisco 3 years ago. So everyone heard of Hightower? Put your hand up if you haven't heard of Hightower. Okay, great. One thing you could do at the break is go to YouTube and type in Hightower, Butchers versus Nutritionalists. It is a video that was undoubtedly recorded in a board meeting where the CEO is explaining the difference between advisors, and someone's gone, stop, record, they put it off to an animated, and it's just brilliant. I've tried 100 times to work out an alternate metaphor, and it is the best metaphor for describing the difference between advisors and advisors. It's such a good point. But the point I went is when I was over there, I had a guy called Michael Parker. Now, Michael was a big guy in that way that Americans are. Not like big, but just big. He had chin, white teeth, lovely suit, very expensive tie, but he spoke so clearly about the journey they were on. And he talked about elite performance, he talked about building elite businesses, he talked about attracting elite advisors. In actual fact, and if anyone wants the notes from that session, I'm happy to share. He talked about the 3 things the business was built on. The first one was software. They did a first round fundraising, which they raised $165 million, and then went out and spent $65 million of that building their own software. They also built it on a couple of philosophies I'm going to talk about in terms of the way they approached it, but they had this attitude that they would hire or they would buy businesses and they would set a standard, and if anybody didn't hit that standard, they were gone. In actual fact, there's a paper. If you want to grab it, it's actually available on the internet. It's their strategic principles written all the way back there. Can everyone see the screen okay? Hopefully you can. Essentially, there were 7 things they were looking to do. They wanted to build a business that was free from external influence. Sound familiar? Multi-clearing. In other words, they weren't just going to use Schwab or JP Morgan or whoever the big ones over there. They were going to have open APL. They were going to be owned by advisors. They were going to have duly registered authorized representatives. They got this weird system in the US where you can literally be having a conversation as a fiduciary best interest advisor, and next minute you could be talking to them and with no best interest at all. But there we go. They wanted to basically say we can work across the whole thing. They wanted natural scope and scale. They wanted to be able to offer the lot, and they were backed by this belief that an independent business was a better business. It was an interesting experience to hear them talk. Now, the bit which I think that actually triggered this is I was reading through an old manual from Kerwin Ray. Is anyone familiar with Kerwin? He's a coach that works with sort of high net worth or big businesses. And he made the point that one of the biggest things he spots in businesses that don't make a breakthrough is they think differently. So most people in businesses rarely become wealthy because it's the entrepreneurs that generally do. Does that make sense? Because they're focused on a high level problem. So people don't get the rewards they want for the risk, the hard work, and all that sort of stuff because they fail to make them realize that in order to do that, to achieve those rewards, you must be able to see yourself first as an entrepreneur who has chosen to create wealth for you and for other people as your vehicle for doing that. Now, I think the bit he misses out there is not just create wealth for you, but also for other people, which is kind of the philosophy behind that. And if you think about it, if you go back to the age of agriculture and farming, I did my family tree a while ago, and one of the people in my distant past was a farm labourer. And I'm talking to my mum, who knows all about this stuff, and I was like, oh, our ancestors were farmers. And she goes, nope, they were farm labourers. It means they turned up on the day, they worked their guts out, they went home. The people who made the money were the people who owned the farms. And then the Industrial Revolution came along. And the people who made the money were the people who owned the factories, right? And now we're at the digital age, and the people who own the money own the code. And that's the way it's going to be. And I think if you look at this from the Alicia perspective, the analogy is really clear for me. She didn't go into this thinking, I'm a gymnast, or I'm a diver, or I'm a skier. She went into it thinking, I'm somebody who wants to win a gold medal and become an Olympian, and that's the vehicle for doing it. That makes sense? It's funny, there was a comment on LinkedIn just the other day when an advisor came up and said, I hate to see all this focus on profit. Why is everyone talking about profit this, profit that, right? You saw it, yeah. And respectfully, I jumped in and said, look, like the analogy is if you can give great advice, but if you don't have a profitable business, you're not going to last. Similarly, if you have a really profitable business, but your advice is rubbish, you're not going to last. The two have got to live together. Does that make sense? The other thing, the second part to this, I think is relevant. I think Jim Rohn said it really, really well. If your why is strong enough, the how becomes really, really clear. Does that make sense? If you look at everything, and I'm going to run you through some of this, the elite performers, the one thing that kind of is present, that enables them to see the forest in amongst all the trees, is they know exactly what their end game is going to be. So I guess the question, if you're looking at this, is what do I focus on? Particularly right now, yeah? What do I focus on? Most people start a business, can we agree, with some sort of financial motivation? That's, otherwise you just continue working for whoever you want, right? But I don't know about you, but I've never met, if you think about money, it's just pieces of plastic. In the US, piece of paper, here it's a piece of plastic so we can go swimming, which is awesome. Have you ever met anybody that's motivated by just plastic? Collecting, well, apart from 3-year-olds when they go to Woolworths. Different kettle of fish. Of course not. You know better than anybody else in the room that if you're talking to someone about money and they go, I want to be rich, I want to be financially independent, the next stage of the conversation, well, what does that mean? And what is that going to change about your life? And usually, what is it about? It's about freedom, choice, opportunity, options, helping other people to get there. Does that make sense? I think about Alicia, and I actually said this to her when we were talking. I'm like, if it was just about the medal, how much have you spent on training? And she was like, God knows. And how many bones had you broken? A lot. Why don't you just go buy a replica? It can't be that expensive. Because it actually wasn't about the gold, was it? And it was about, there was something in her head about standing on the podium or being that person or getting there. That's the thing that drove her. And I can't imagine every single time she went up and over, crashed down, broke her ankle, broke her legs, broke her arms, God knows what. I don't know about you. I would have gone, maybe not. But she just kept going. I've never met anybody who's broke as many bones as she has. And she just kept going, and then eventually she got there. So I wanted to kick that off because that's why I wanted to dive into this today. And I think if I can ask one thing of you over the next 2 days, can you, everybody in this room, take your advisor hat off and put on the hat that says, I'm an entrepreneur, and to survive in this next wave, I've got to work out how to build a business that creates rewards for me and for my clients. And if we can do that, I reckon we're going to have a damn good session. We're going to come out of here because I've been talking for a long time about the wave. You know, the wave rolling through the industry. I think the wave's over. I think we're seeing now that people are just starting to wake up and realize that if it's too late, they're not ahead of the wave. Right here and now, I think what we need to do is make that shift to realize that 2 years' time, it's the businesses that take on that shift to go, I'm an entrepreneur, that I need to create a business that enables me to have what I need and the people I work for to get what I need and also create wealth along the way. Is that fair? So what makes elite? I reckon there's 4 things. Desire is probably the first one. This is Alicia. This is the presentation she gave when I was part of it. This was her at the top becoming a gold medalist. 7 years earlier, she'd sat down and analysed the top aerial skier, 7 things that made her amazing, and she'd given her a rating out of 10 for each of them. And she'd come up with the top. To be a gold medalist, you had to be 56 out of 70. She'd analysed herself and she realised she was probably 7. Things like fitness, aerial ability, skiing ability. And over 7 years, she just systematically built herself up until she was a 56 to 60. And that's how she did it. I reckon behaviour's got a lot to do with it. And generally what you tend to see is elite performers isn't just about they leave this stuff to chance. They have models, methods, frameworks they use. Is anyone familiar with the observe, orient, decide, act framework? In the Korean War, the Americans and the fighter pilots they were fighting against were generally Russians. They were incredibly well matched. I think the planes they had the F-86 Sabres and the MiG-15s. Arguably, the MiGs were actually better planes. But the Americans won air supremacy because of this model, which is every pilot they had was trained to do 4 things when they engaged a MiG. They would observe the situation they were in, what the circumstances were. They would then orient themselves to the surroundings, find out whether they had a tactical advantage. This is kind of where the science ended, and they would decide on a course of action, assess it, and they'd act. Meanwhile, the Russians were kind of just doing whatever came to mind, and as a result, with an arguably inferior plane, they managed to absolutely dominate. And there's a bunch of frameworks that tend to come up. Mindset comes up time and time again. I've mentioned extreme ownership with Jocko Willink, but this book talks a lot about the fact how, as Navy SEALs, which you'd argue they're probably the most elite combat participants, you know, they talk about responsibility, they talk about simple action-oriented plans, they talk about communication as being one of the vital pieces, and they talk about the fact that at the end of it all, as a team, everybody needs to believe in it. Because I guess if you communicate poorly and you're not all behind in an elite situation as a Navy SEAL, you pay the ultimate price. I think the final thing is, anyone see the Netflix documentary with Bill Gates? It's about as interesting as you could make Bill Gates, but there's some really interesting parts on the way he sort of consumes information. But one of the great stories from that is he was talking to a Microsoft product development team. He was on one of those meet and greet things. And the product development team were extremely excited. They're like, Bill, you're going to be launching our thing in 6 months. And they started telling us all this information about it. And it's doing this, it's doing that. And Bill went, stop. When's the presentation? And they said, it's 6 months from now. He said, don't tell me anything. I'll speak to you a week out. And he stopped the conversation there and then. And I think the reason he did that was because he knew that if he put all this information in his head there and then, it was the wrong information. In other words, he knew what to focus on. So I've just told you what elite is, but let's talk about why, in the context of your business, this is relevant right now. About 4 or 5 weeks ago, I went to a IFA client experience workshop. Did anybody come along? No, good. That means this is fresh content. There were some really great speakers there. One of the guys who spoke was Stephen Prendeville. I don't know if you've seen Stephen speak. He's interesting because Stephen, he's quite a dry speaker, but his content is so good. And he put up a bunch of slides. I want to share these. He talked about trends in the industry. He talked about the fact, obviously working in the buy-sell area, he talked about the valuations for advice businesses are moving more and more towards EBIT multiples as buyers focus on return. And he said the goal that investors are looking at for modern advice firms is an EBIT margin of 30 to 40%. Now, if you've done pricing with me, you know that's where we sit down and we go in and we understand all the reasons why most businesses don't hit 30 to 40% because of the, they discount. But essentially, if you're an investor, which there are so many investors right now investing in our industry because of the yield, that's what they're looking for, right? He talked about the fact that costs in areas such as PR, insurance, compliance, all of that stuff is rising. And the same investors are looking for cost savings in next generation solutions, outsourcing and embracing technology. That's what they're expecting to see. It's kind of stuff we've been talking about for a while. This is the big one I think is really interesting. They're seeing, as we get close to the FASIA deadlines, they're seeing the availability of businesses kick up and up and up and up. And I think this is a huge opportunity because if you've got a great business model, great processes, and you can jump in and you can buy a bunch of businesses, that's how you go from being small to big in a very short space of time. Agreed? He also put up this analysis of sale prices for different businesses at the point in time. What do you notice? Yeah, a lot of red in there. Who thinks now's a really good time to buy a business? Okay. Who thinks now is a really good time to sell a business? It's interesting. You speak to some people and some people are like, I wouldn't buy or sell. I think Paul Barrett came out and said, was it Paul? He said, I wouldn't be buying or selling anything right now because there's too much uncertainty. The sellers don't know whether it's the bottom. The buyers don't know whether it's the bottom. We don't know what's going. But what do you notice? There's a few places where there is no red. One of them's here. Large financial planning businesses are pretty stable. And over here as well, accounting businesses with financial planning seem to be climbing slightly. I was talking a while ago to a bunch of advisors and I got a question about, what do you think you should do, valuation? And I said, look, I told the story of a guy that I worked with once called Peter Fallon, who owned a business. And we met up in the city and we started having this conversation about valuations. And I thought he was asking about the specifics of what his business was worth because he'd been made an offer. The truth is he had no idea at all. So we started talking through the basics and I said, look, how much do you want for the business? What would be a great outcome? And he said 3.5 times. What would you walk away from? 2.5 times. I said, great. Who's doing the buying? He said, my dealer group. I was like, whoa. Okay. What you need to do is go back to your dealer group and ask them why they want your business. And then ask them what they're willing to offer. And they said they wanted his business. They could use a template for every business in the dealer group and they offered him 3.75. Now, I'll ask this to you. If someone came across to you and they had a business fully systematized, systems and processes, all of the referral partnerships are in agreements, their software is in place, the staff are happy, they're clear role definitions, they've got total control of everything, would you hesitate to pay top dollar for that business and plug it into your own? Because ultimately, if we talk about large financial planning businesses, the assumption is we've got businesses that have progressed. And I think we're going to see more and more of that.
What does large mean? How many people on that?
I don't know the exact definition.
I can probably give you one off the AZ group.
Can I just grab the catch box, Mom? Yeah, I'd love to know. Fire away.
So just off the AZ group.
Yes.
They bring it in at about a turnover of 4 million.
Okay.
And I think 15 plus staff.
4 million, 15 plus staff. Where does the valuation catch on $1 million? The valuation on EBIT starts to kick in about 2 million once you start to sort of the crossover, right? So I'd say any time a business is people are looking at the recurring revenue and they look at the EBIT and the EBIT tends to become more appealing. But 4 million and 15 staff, that's a decent sized business. EY did a bit of a research piece on trends. They identified some really key things around the growth of independent advisors, independent advisory firms. That's a massive surge globally. They said 40% of Australians are going to switch wealth providers in the next 3 years. Superannuation is going to more than double. $3 trillion multi-generational wealth transfer. It'd be interesting to see whether that actually happens because I think there's going to be a lot of spending of the inheritance stuff. Preference for this is really interesting. People are more and more comfortable with non-in-person interactions. 40% of Australians are going to prefer mobile apps, and 53% of Australian respondents are going to use fintech in the next 3 years. What do you think of that?
Exciting.
It is. Anyone think it's not exciting?
I think it's exciting, but I think it's fairy tales if you look at where the industry's at. There's a lot to be done.
True.
You tell me, is there anyone in this room that has complete control over every element of their data?
No.
Right.
No.
So let's start there.
True. Good point.
But that's got nothing to do with the industry, that's consumers.
And no, well, I'm talking about how do we serve the industry, like the clients who want that.
In theory, open banking should help.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. When I went to San Francisco, over in the US, the banking systems there are archaic. One of the guys I met is Michael, who was running a Bitcoin. He did a test. He transferred some money out of a big bank to a regional bank, and then 4 days later, he phoned the regional bank on the premise of being from the big bank and reversed the payment without any authorization from the small bank. Yeah. Meanwhile, over here, we've got great systems in the background. It's just there's walls around them put up by the big four, and that's one of the challenges. He also talked about the fact that a lot of businesses are now looking at, they want to see models behind the advice. They want to see structures and frameworks, and this is one of the ones he made, as it took as an example. You guys know, and we've been talking about it for a while, that demand continues to grow while supply continues to, or will continue to reduce. So the opportunity is still there. Does that make sense? I think it's about these two things, which I think are the big trends moving forward. Does anyone disagree that over the next few years, we're going to see a restoration of trust in the industry as the banks get out, as more and more qualified advisors, the authorities are more and more vigilant, and we're going to start to see the removal of conflicts. In addition, there's an expectation that we're going to see better businesses for all of those reasons, which I think if you follow that, that's a pretty significant path to success over the next 2 to 5 years. Agreed? Do you ever have that time where you go out and you find a quote and you look back to try and find out where it came from? I remember the most famous one I found was, don't believe everything you read on the internet. Apparently Abraham Lincoln said that, which I think is amazing. It's a really good quote. That didn't go as well as I thought it would. Who's heard that one? Success leaves footprints. I'd heard that so many times and I'd never looked to see who said it. And it turns out the gentleman who said it is Booker T. Washington. Isn't that a great name? Has anyone ever heard of Booker T. Washington? Neither had I until I met it. He was an American educator, author, orator, and advisor to presidents of the United States, and one of the last generation of black leaders who were born into slavery. Now, there's a dude who was owned by someone else, and then became an advisor. He was also founder of the National Negro Business League. He gave a very famous speech called the Atlanta Compromise, which was celebrated. He was an incredible uniter, but most importantly, he used the media like Kim Kardashian uses Instagram. He used it. I mean, it amazes me that someone would come from such a challenging start to life and then lead to a position of leadership. But I love this saying because it's as true now as it was back then. That if you look, you want to know how someone got famous, you want to know how Elon Musk achieved what he did, if you want to know how someone in this room became the advisor or built the business, you could go back and unpack their story and you'd find those little hints of how it happened, right? In the lead up to this, I did a bunch of research. I listened to people like Kerwin Ray. I read some of Stephen Covey's stuff. I went through the 7 Habits of Effective People. And I wanted to find out, as well as a lot of the Kaufman Institute studies, and I wanted to analyze what makes, because we're talking about entrepreneurialism, what makes someone a good entrepreneur? And this is on page 10, if you want to fill in the blanks with me. Now, these are the 10 that I think you could probably identify that if you were the perfect entrepreneur, and by the way, I don't think anybody on the planet has all 10, but I reckon if you look at someone who's entrepreneurially minded, they're more likely to have these than not. The first one I think is a commercial focus. And you speak to anybody who's a successful entrepreneur and they can usually turn around and tell you how they come up with something, the profitability of the business. They can talk about those things pretty confidently, right? They're the people who go, profit's important, as is looking after clients. Profit's not a dirty word. Most of them are very outcome driven. They don't create business plans which don't have that hard and pointy bit where it goes, these are the metrics. This is how we're measuring success. It's very clear. We're going to put a man on the moon before the end of the 70s. We're going to put a computer on in every home. Our goal is to become the number one software company turning over. You know what I mean? Most entrepreneurs are either likable, trustworthy, or earn respect. Kerry Packer's a really interesting one. I don't think you call him likable. Maybe to some. I wouldn't necessarily trust. But I reckon most people who met him respected him.
You would trust him to do act in a certain way.
You trust him to be Kerry Packer. You trust him to give you a hard time. But I think entrepreneurs have usually got one of those things in there. You either look at them and go, I really respect you, or you trust them and you follow them or you like them. I think this one comes up a lot. Entrepreneurs are able to focus on what matters and cut out anything that doesn't. Do you ever meet those people who just got this unshakable belief? And sometimes you go, they talk about Steve Jobs had the reality distortion field. I had a mate of mine, Dean, I've spoken about before. He spent 10 years struggling to get the startup off the ground. Had no money. I was speaking to him from South America. He was like, you know what? It's really hard. And he still kept going. And then went out to the Silicon Valley with no money, slept on people's couches, found the business model, came back, $40 million in 7 months. Never wavered in the idea he was going to make it. Had times where he couldn't believe how hard it was. Never say die. And I think there's a difference. This is believing you're going to get there. This is choosing never to give up. I think most of us go through this period where we go back and go, do you know what? This is really hard. And you take some time, but most of them have never believed. Clarity of purpose, big why I'm doing this. Most entrepreneurs that I meet are pretty decisive. They might not make the best decisions every single time, but they make a decision. I think it was George Patton said that a good plan executed today is better than a perfect plan executed tomorrow. They're clear on their why, and the difference between the two, by the way, purpose is very much about the point of what you're trying to do to the world. This is what's in it for you. And the final piece, it comes to kind of the extreme ownership. They take total ownership of everything. If it stuffs up, it's my fault. If we make a mistake, I'll take ownership. Is there any in there where you disagree with? Have I missed anything out?
What about mindset? That a lot of them say, I aim for the stars.
Yeah.
Aim high, go high.
Go big. Purpose. I think there's a book about it that says the problem is most people, they aim way too low. Yes.
Passion.
Passion's definitely a big one. Where does that passion come from? The heart. It's kind of that Jim Rohn, it's the Jim Rohn thing, isn't it? If the why is big enough, the how is never hard. I agree.
You don't have it. That's the point.
You can argue that some entrepreneurs are so passionate and so it can sometimes override everything else. Yeah, Matt.
With the like, trust, respect, what would like be which one's the most, which one's the least important?
If you speak to Jordan Peterson, he'll say likability is the most important thing. But then Jordan Peterson's comes from a collaborative point of view. It depends. Let's do a straw poll. Who thinks likability is the most important thing? Okay. Who thinks trustworthiness is the most important thing? Who thinks respect? Fair enough. I guess it's really, I guess the answers have probably got a lot to do with your personal preference. People who are likable and have got a lot out of being likable, probably going to get ahead on that. If you're an actor, I reckon likable would be pretty important. If you're a politician, respect is probably the one, isn't it?
No successful team sports all get on. They all hate each other.
But if you look at the halo effect, which is about social media,
Yeah.
and what people pass on the halo is it's about looks, likability, attractiveness. And so that's another one you can throw left field to.
But I'm not sure. I agree, but I don't know. I think Kim Kardashian, you'd probably say, is a very successful entrepreneur. Yeah.
But there's been heaps of research papers, extensive research papers on high-performing teams or high-performing individuals.
Yes.
And the highest thing is trust.
Okay.
So if you've got a group of people who are in a high-performing team, any elite sport, any
There's a trust in each other.
Trust first.
Which goes back to the point around do your job.
Yeah.
In a team, everyone's got a job. And I need to know that I'm doing my job, you're doing your job. So I've got confidence if I need to kick the ball, throw the ball, do whatever, you're in that spot where you need to be.
Who's familiar with Roy Keane, a footballer? For those who don't, Manchester United midfielder, probably the greatest Irish player of all time. Absolute psychopath. Likeable? No. He would chew absolute chunks out of people. Trustworthy? Hell yeah. Respect?
Shane Warne and Gilchrist hate each other, didn't they? They're in the same team for years.
True.
Stu, I think it takes a long time to be trusted and respected, but it takes seconds to be liked
That's also a really good point.
and to like someone else. So the impact of likability is instant, where trust and respect takes time to build that.
Do you think there's any interplay between the level of success someone reaches and the level of likability they have as a result of that success? So by definition, the more elite you become, in many cases, the less likable you're going to become to more and more people.
But then the others come into play, don't they? Trust and respect. And you might have started with here, but then you're there.
I guess the other way. I reckon people like people because they're successful.
I think that's true in the States. I'm not sure it's true here.
Talk about in Australia is appalling.
Oh, it's worse in England.
Anyone that's successful,
They're on a spectrum and want to be their mates.
yeah, I still reckon anyone who starts to show
It starts
success,
like, and then you build, then you can build the brand from it. The Kardashians started as how
Likeable.
like, and then they built the brand on trust and respect. And
It's interesting. This is I'm interested. I want to observe. Why is this the one that's we've focused on the most?
Because we don't all agree.
We don't all agree on that one.
There's three different parts to that. The others are fairly straightforward, but here you've got three things that are quite different.
But you need one or more of them.
Yeah.
If you're not likable, I mean, you don't have to be likable, but if you're not likable, you need to be trustworthy or respected.
But then that takes so long to get to the other components because if you're not likable,
true.
then people aren't going to interact with you.
That's true.
So if you interact with you, how they're going to get to know you, get respect and trust.
Can you do me a favour? Can each of you just take a second and write down the 3 areas that as an entrepreneur you think you're strongest in?
As in 3 of those.
Just the 3 of those. Or, you know what, if it's not there, write down another one. But that's what the research tells us, that those 10, they're the big 10. What are the 3 areas that you're strongest in?
And maybe the reason why we're all, this is, that we're talking about is because we don't really attraction things. We create things and we're dealing with people. Everything we do is creating intelligence and it's around people. So like, trust, respect is the doorway to be able to be entrepreneurs in our field.
It's true. Okay, it starts out, you're a person of value. And then you get enough resource to invest in the team and they become the theme of value and then it's the system. But then again, that's also about clients as well, isn't it? As is that to some degree. Top 3. Done? Who saw commercial focus as being one of their strengths? Top 3. Show of hands. Greg? Okay, that's interesting. Who outcome driven as one of their strengths? Okay. Like, trust, respect. That sort of underlines what we've been talking about. Priorities first. Now you're good at it?
Absolutely.
Okay. So why do you think, like, because you come from a software background and everybody else in here comes
from a strategy fix.
So why is that a strength of yours?
Because the reason is to find out what are the problems you go in. The problems then relate to what the outcomes are going to be, what I'm going to do to change that company.
Who put unshakable belief as one of theirs? Yeah, I'd believe that. That's fair. Where does that come from?
So,
but why? Was it your upbringing? Like, I know it's personal. Do you think it's your upbringing? Is it something that happened to you in life? Or is it just the way you're wired?
I just think also, just as part of the industry, I just think you've got to have an unshakable belief in that we're doing something that's completely different. Majority of the industry.
Are either of you readers of Stoicism at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. You? Yeah. Write that one down, Stoicism. Really good for that. There's a thing in Stoicism that says every month, you should live the worst possible life you can. Wear the worst clothes. Eat the worst food. Sleep on the floor. Because when you know the worst that can happen to you and you've experienced it, you're not scared of it. It's all about looking past the fear. Who said never say die is one of their strengths? Oh, that's good. I like it.
Those 2 points are very, very close.
They are. Unshakable belief is the belief that you'll get out of it. Never say die is the belief that you will still keep going down a route even when other people give up.
Does unshakable belief also mean you believe 100% in what you
actually do it.
It's more about the fact that if someone turns around and says you'll never do it, you'll go, yeah, I will. Whereas this will be, you'll always find a way.
And that one, I get pure joy in that one.
What, the never say die?
Those two are interrelated.
They are.
I don't die, and I always end up getting people wrong, as you know.
Clarity of purpose?
That also ties back to ownership.
It does. Decisive? Someone's going, maybe. Who's super clear on their why? That's good. Total ownership. Okay. I think the challenge is when you don't get this right is everybody in this room wears hats, lots of hats, especially right now. And the trick is if you end up wearing too much hats or you don't know when to take them off, that's the thing that holds you back. I think one of the challenges is sometimes things can get out of balance. And you have those moments where you realize that you may be too deep into it, you can't see it, or alternatively, you have those moments where you go, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Michael Kitces talks about the dangerous middle. Talks about there's advice businesses that are down here, everything's going pretty, and then they break through here, they go through the business, enterprise brand, and they get stuck here. And I think getting stuck here for too long is very dangerous because you want to break through here. I think if I was thinking about the biggest challenge or one of the biggest motivators, anyone read Dave Goggins' Can't Hurt Me? Yeah, how good. Have you listened to it? He's a monster. He literally did a 100K run on broken legs. But he was asked, what's the one thing that drives him? He said, it drives him is the idea he's going to meet God, and God's going to pull out a folder, and he's going to tell him the life he was designed to live. And he had this fear that he's going to walk in and go, dude, Goggins, what happened to you? You were supposed to be an Olympic champion. You were meant to live this amazing life. And how did you end up being a janitor at McDonald's? Dude, you had everything. Next. And he said that's the thing that motivates him, the idea that he walks in one day and God goes, dude, you did well. It's good image, right? I think if you get this right, as you get the sort of the behaviours and all of this right, you get to choose what you work on. You get to
If you go back to Goggins,
yeah.
talk about balance.
Whoops. Yes, definitely.
There's a point where he's very, very selfish.
He's an ultra-marathon runner.
Yeah.
He literally spends his life training. I agree. He definitely got obsessive.
So there's a balance with listening to what he talks about. So yes,
I agree.
A very clear focus around what he wants to do. So there's that unshakable belief. And he's very clear on his purpose, but it is to the detriment to people around.
I agree. There's three parts in life. There's family, there's friends, and there's business. And you have to reset the balance between the three. Otherwise, you lose one. And nobody wants to be old without friends or family. Prize you get to choose. I think everybody would benefit from setting boundaries. By the way, this hasn't got a lot to do with boundaries. I put quarantine in. I just saw this and went, I really want to put this in. Who thinks they have set really clear boundaries? Clear enough boundaries for their life, for what they're willing to do for clients, for what they won't do, for how they're contacted. Who thinks they set as good boundaries as elite performers, elite business people? No. I think if you look at the boundaries that even CEOs of companies, they set themselves up with very clear, you can get into contact. The only person I know, a corporate CEO who answers his own email is Tim Cook. That's the only one. And even then, I don't know how he does it. I think you also, if you get the right and the behaviors, you create less friction. I like this saying because I think it's true. It doesn't get easier. You just get better at doing it. In other words, if we're sitting down there going, I want business to get easier, that's not the point. It's about getting better at how you manage it. I want to share with you a model. I reckon if we're going to aim for each of you to live with the ability to give yourself the space and the time to put that, I'm going to create, just the business I want. Whether you aim to grow a big business or whether you aim to grow as just a business that operates according to the way you want it, there's kind of three things you need to get heading around. The first one is what you focus on. Agreed? The second part to this is the action that you take in relation to that. And the third one over here is the outcome you achieve as a result of doing it. I think at the bottom, the thing that underpins it all, and some of you have got a really strong element of that, is the purpose. Again, we talked at the beginning, most successful business people, they have this really strong purpose. I think the action here is, if you haven't, to clearly define what's the purpose, what's your purpose, why are you doing this business, what do you aim to give that's going to get you back, what do you reckon that gives you? When you're very clear on your purpose, direction's good actually, motivation, right? People who have a really clear defined purpose, they're generally driven to do it. Make sense? So sex stage up. That's great, Freudian slap. The next stage is once you've got clear on the purpose, I think it's about behaviours. And I think the clear thing that I think everybody, I know I benefit from sitting down and going, okay, let me actually understand what I'm actually doing when I come into work, how I'm behaving. I know what I think I'm doing, but am I actually managing things the way I am actually acting according to the system? What does that give you? When you understand the behaviours of yourself, it gives you awareness. One of the biggest reasons, I've had coaching clients where I come in and they go, I'm not getting this, I'm not getting that. And I go, right, open your diary, let's have a look. And when we uncover it, we go, you're not actually doing any of the work. Oh, I thought I was. No. So the reason you're getting the result is because you're not actually setting aside the time, you're not doing the things you need to. Who's worked with principal advisors where they come in and they go, at a board level, this is what I want to happen. Okay, great. And off you go and you implement it. The next thing you know, you have a meeting and go, everyone's doing it apart from the principal advisor. What's going on? They're not following the process. Having that situation right now with the business who's not here at the moment because we're trying to focus on solving that problem. Make sense? It's not always the principal advisors. It can be other people as well. Once you get the behaviour, what? People are in the business, in other words. Right. Once you're unclear on that, what's the next stage? Is the ability to understand the progress. And this for me is all about measure. What happens if you're able to measure your progress? Clarity. What's one of my favourite bumper stickers? Don't believe everything you think. The human memory is incredibly fallible. Did you know the last thing, when we're remembering something, we're actually remembering the last time we remembered it. Incredibly easy to implant memories into people. The next part up, once you've got progress, you understand the behaviour, the purpose, systems. Now, whenever I say systems, people think software. I'm actually not talking about that. I'm talking about methods of behaving that are usually backed by tools, timings, frameworks, habits. Make sense? I bet people go to the gym and they've got a specific time that works for them and a specific time that doesn't, right? And if they break out of that habit, what happens? You fall out because that's the system you've got designed. What are we aiming to do? Design the systems. Sit down and go, right, how am I going to make this work? If we do this right, what do we get? Consistency. And final step, you've got clear on why you're doing it. You're aware of your own behaviour. You can measure progress. You've got systems in place that make it easy. Then we add the tech. We start by mapping it. Yeah. And what happens when you map your tech really, really well? You're able to go, ooh, let's drop a bit of automation in here. You know what? Let's do it there. We can automation. Is that helpful? Over here, action. So I'll run through it one by one. It starts the foundation of all is purpose. The action here is to sit down and define your purpose. The outcome of that to you, is your motivation or direction. Once you've got your purpose in place, you know why you're doing it. The goal is to focus on your behaviour or people's behaviour, which you're seeking to understand what they actually do, which gives you awareness of what's actually going on. Next stage up, you want to be able to focus on progress. We do that by measuring progress, which gives us clarity. Once you've got that clarity, you can start to look at the systems to make it easy, which is designing the ways to make it simple, which gives you consistency. The final step in the process is you go, how can I add technology? By mapping it and then dropping in the right tools at the right time to remove some of the human elements. Is that useful? A couple of case studies I wanted to share because, we've spoken about elite performance. I was reading a couple of books and two people came up that I wanted to share. This gentleman is John Paul DeJoria. Who's heard of him? Yeah, you kind of would do. He launched Patron in 1980 while he was living in his car. Just sold it recently, 70% stake, $5.1 billion. Doesn't have an email address, doesn't own a computer, laptop, tablet. Why? If I did, I'd be inundated. That's kind of telling. This gentleman, Mark Ford, is the chief strategist at Agora, which is a significant publishing company. His story went from 100,000 in debt to a net worth of 240, and his comment was one of the biggest reasons that most businesses never lift off is because they have an obsession with little chores. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a fair observation? And I think one of the...
Especially in this industry.
Why especially in this industry?
Because I think we're analytical. A lot of people are analytical and will really get caught on those sort of
Details.
Yeah.
Detail orientated. Yeah. Can you turn down the audio a little bit? Thank you. And there's a model I'd love to show you as part of this, because there's sort of 3 areas you don't want to play in and 1 area you don't do. The final one is purpose. And this is kind of where I wanted to spend a bit of time today. I love, has everyone seen this quote from Luciano Pavarotti? Many people mistake my passion for discipline. It's true though, right? When you love what you do, discipline becomes easier. I mean, I asked Chief a while back, I said, how do you find yourself getting up in the morning and exercising? He says, it's really easy when you love exercising. The trick is to turn your mind apart. I read this book about 4 years ago, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Who has read it? Have you read this, David? Okay. I actually got the audiobook and I downloaded it. And it's one of those audiobooks that has a, hello and welcome to Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I am your narrator today, Arthur Wadsbottle. That kind of thing, right? But I started listening to it, and the first part of the book is essentially an observation on a man's experience while he was in a concentration camp during the war. And it's such a scientific observation because the second half of the book is all about the branch of, I guess, you call it psychology, but it's not. He's very critical of psychology, that he came about as observing what happened in the concentration camps. And the core tenet of what he noticed is the difference between those who died and suffered and those who made it through was the meaning they attached to the experience. So some people, they told themselves the story that's the worst thing that could ever happen to them, and they faded. Other people embraced the idea that I'm going to suffer, but they got through. They took something from it. Now, he was going to articulate it far better than I just did. But out of the back of that, he wrote this. It's a beautiful book. And he puts for the branch of psychology came up is called logotherapy. And the core tenet is the idea that someone's quality of life is defined by the story they tell themselves about the reason they exist. One guy, he gives an example he was treating, who'd had a miserable life, and the meaning he decided to attach to it is the reason you've had a tough life and you struggled is because that's what's going to enable your children to have a better life. And his mental health changed very, very quickly. Is that making sense? There's also been a lot of study recently done on the science of purpose. And we're not just talking about sort of the woo-woo stuff. Actually, people looking in and going, scientifically speaking, what's the basis? And they're finding time and time again that people who have this clarity of end game, not only are they going to find it easier to succeed, but they're happier, they're healthier, and they live longer. It's really interesting. I also wanted to pull this quote out because I love it. Ralph Waldo Emerson asked about purpose, and he said, my purpose in life is to laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people, the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a team social condition, to know even one life breathe easier because you live. That is success. It's funny when you talk about purpose, you tend to go the Steve Jobs route. I want to put a dent in the world. I want to put a man on the moon. But you see something as simple as that, and it's kind of beautiful. We're now into number 2, which is behaviours. There was a story behind this slide when I designed it 4 weeks ago, and I can't remember why I put Jonah Lomu on there.
The All Blacks.
It was something to do with the All Blacks in 1996. Maybe it was to do with the fact they were dominant and then they got beaten.
Don't they clean the sheds up and stuff?
They might do. I know the Japanese do it. Anyway.
Talk about it. Yeah, legacy.
Yeah.
That's probably why I did it.
Their behaviours.
How many people... I wanted to share this because how you manage your focus can change from time to time. Do we agree? Some of us go through ups and downs, and that's part of the entrepreneurial journey. I think Seth Godin wrote a book about it called The Dip. My experience has been if you've got a wide focus, as in you can see all of the playing field in front of you, and you've got high discipline levels, in other words, you're very clear on what you're working, you tend to be in a state of flow. Would you agree with that? However, some people spoke about this earlier. They talked about detail. You know when you've got a narrow focus and you've got high discipline levels, I find you tend to be in really deep. Would you agree? Yeah. So this is kind of space where you're working on the right things, progress easily. Over here, on the other hand, you're probably deep in the detail. This is the chore space. And I find that when I get deep in this space, I have to stop and ask myself, am I working on the right stuff? And often the answer is no, right? What about when you're down here? You've got a wide focus and low discipline levels. You're kind of working in spurts, right? You're kind of meeting deadlines because they're coming along. You can't seem to get into things. Ever had that experience? And you're not clear on the direction, the priorities. And then you've got this space over here where you've got a really narrow focus and low discipline levels where you're just not motivated. You can't seem to get into things. You're not clear at all. And I think anything that's to do with elite performers, eventually you're going to end up here, right? Everybody does. And often, to be honest, going fishing is it's the best solution to get out of it, go and have a holiday. Does anybody find themselves who finds themselves they're always in here? Good. Who finds themselves sometimes they get stuck here? Yeah. Who's found themselves sometimes stuck over here? Who's found themselves stuck here? Yeah. So everybody's there. Would you like some strategies on how to deal with each of them? Okay. So what's the best strategies of when you've got this narrow focus, when you find yourself, oh my God, I'm working on, I'm polishing the car and I haven't even noticed it's been written off, is generally, you know what I mean? Nice and polished front end, destroyed back end. Generally, this is where I would suggest sitting down and doing like a role audit. Getting really clear on what your role actually is. You ever had that time where you find yourself suddenly encroaching back into areas that you used to do? Or someone else, like Jen, she'll tap me on the shoulder and go, why are you doing my job? And I'll go, whoops, I've done it. I'm managing time, batching, blocking, chunking. Batching being, okay, I've got a bunch of work to do with clients over the next week. I'm going to do it all on Monday. I'm going to put it together. I've got a bunch of work that's to do with marketing. I'm going to do that Friday morning. That's batching. Blocking is about getting out of the office, turning off the phone, putting in your diary a little thing that says, if anybody books anything in this space, I will jump over the table and literally You're pretty good at this, Greg.
This is just day-to-day for me. Yeah.
Workspace, to avoid distraction. Who's got an optimum workspace where they don't get interrupted, they don't get people coming in and going, can I just bother you? Yeah. I think going back to the why is really important, and ironically, enforced planned spontaneity apparently is really, really good. So in other words, have that Friday where you actually plan, I'm going to leave the office this afternoon and I'm going to go out and sit in the park or play with the kids or whatever it might be. How many people do that on a regular basis? Good stuff. I did it Wednesday. I actually planned just to get out and I walked across the park and walked into the house and Rachel was like, what are you doing here? Yeah, get out. I'm working. Down here, if you're feeling distracted, and there's a few people, it's totally understandable right now that people would be distracted. I find it really, I play a lot in this space. Who's got like a journal or a part of their project management system that's called the R&D piece or the idea thing, the vault? You got one? How useful is it? Yeah, it's really good because it stops you telling the ideas to other people like Jen, who then goes, why are you telling me this? And I tend to have a rule where I'll park it in the journal, and if I come back to it a month later and I still love the idea, I'll do it. Is that helpful? Do you have a similar thing?
Yeah, I do a journal just the one page.
Yeah.
And I don't get it every day, but pretty much carry it in the bag, and it's literally, it's not as big as that, but it's a standard page, and I just dump thoughts, and some of it can be business ideas, sometimes it might be I'm just having a shit day, and I'll vent, but it just helps me clear the mind in the morning. I generally do it once I come into the office, it's one of the first.
Just get it done.
Yeah, but it does give me a chance to put some ideas on paper, and I'll go back, I've got 2 or 3 books and then just go back and review it.
Do you keep them under lock and key, or would you be happy for them to become publicly available?
No.
So what you plan to do for that as well? Or
No, I do. I have a like a deep focus sheet that I'll do for the week, and then so if I've got time, 10 half-hour blocks, and I'll work through. Sometimes it might be I'll get an idea in my head, but sometimes I'll put that on Friday, and I'll block out half an hour to do that, so I get the idea out of my head. Put it on Friday, and do it on Friday.
You're very structured in the way that you approach things. I know you read a lot, and you tend to read something and adopt it. Particularly the way you start the morning, it's really become a feature of the way you work, right?
Yeah, it just helps me get quite focused, and it means that also for me on the day, if I know that there's certain things that I want to get done, I've blocked it out, and I'm pretty good on blocking time in the diary. But then I do it with paper because I can shuffle around, because sometimes things do come in.
Yep.
But then at least I can look at it at the end of the day, and it's not that issue of, I've got to be at the office at a certain time. If I've done all that stuff because I've been really efficient and focused at the time, it's like, you know what, I'm going to just leave.
I'm out of here.
I'm out, and I go home and much better focus.
Tim?
I was just going to say, I met someone the other day who told me they journal religiously every day.
Yeah.
and she throws it immediately in the bin.
Wow.
Every time. She just said, I'll get dumped out on my steam ahead, frustrated.
That's fair enough.
Then leave the house. So I thought that was it.
That is interesting. I've never heard that before. This is also a really useful strategy. And I start each action by actually defining what you're trying to achieve. I actually, particularly with the marketing, the reason I do the 90 days, because by the time I come up and do the action, if I'm here, I'll find myself, if there's even a small obstacle between me and writing the article, when I'm in that space, I'll pontificate. Oh, maybe I should write this, maybe I should write that. But if I've got something going, you said a month ago that you were going to write an article about this, so I'll write that article, it kind of takes the emotional side of things out of it. Does that make sense? Finish before starting goes without saying. One thing at a time. I think it's a really simple strategy, incredibly useful. I really like this one, working in noise-filled environments. Who works better in a noisy environment? Who works better with specific tasks in a noise-filled environment? Like I always write better in a noisy cafe.
Or lots of I've got to have music playing. Doesn't distract me whatsoever.
Dean Holmes, when we used to do these things, and he would stand up and do the Fast Start 50, he would put on headphones and listen to the same song over and over and over and over again, because it was just the background noise. Final area, who finds themselves here? We all do. I think in changing environment is probably the most important thing. I don't know about you, but if I turn up to the office day after day after day, I suddenly start to realize it's time to work from home, and vice versa. Someone asked me the other day, do you think you should get an office within your, do you think you need an office? I say, when you start a business, probably not. But I reckon after about 2 years, you probably need a space other than your home to work in, as a general rule for a startup. Learn something new, engage with a new project. I think be accountable to someone else is really important. And also ration pleasurable inputs, I think, is another good one. Is this useful?
A good one to change the environment for people that drive.
It's true.
They didn't work hard. Might take you 20 minutes longer or 10 minutes longer, or might be even whatever reason, but just change it. Your mind, it's amazing.
I love that.
Suddenly like, I'm sure I've got to turn the light on. Because sometimes you can get home,
General rule. But yeah, I mean, that's actually a really good thing. Someone told me once, never drive the same way home twice in 2 days. How many people go the same way home every day? And it's not. Do me a favour, will you just drive home a different way and see how you go?
I've only got 2 ways. 6 minutes.
We'll get it. Maybe take the long route. Maybe take the long route. Anyway, is this helpful? So if you find yourself in one space, can you do me a favour? Can you just circle maybe 1 or 2 of those strategies that you're hearing, that you think you could, maybe even just one in each quadrant that you could take next time you find yourself, you know what, my focus is a bit wide and I'm feeling a bit down. What can I do to change it, to get back into that elite performance area? Maybe if you find yourself, you know what, I'm too deep. What's the strategy that you could go, okay, I've recognized that I'm aware of the behavior. The next step is I'm going to put in place a strategy in order to put me back in that space. Does that make sense?
You would have to think that a lot of people are in the bottom right with all the changes, education, trying to work on your business and all that sort of thing. There's just a lot of... I know there's a lot... Then I also find there's a lot of people who react to that. By doing that, they go, they go back to something they know really, really well. There's one accounting firm I've been working with for the past 4 years. Love them to death. But every time we do a coaching meeting, the first thing we table, even if we're making the agenda, they go so deep into that, it's not funny. And the more stressed they are, the deeper they go straight away. So my job is to pull them out and go, hey guys, we're not going deep yet. We're going wide. So it depends on, I think different people have a different default reaction to stress, reaction to all that sort of stuff. The third area I think is kind of key and we talked about is progress, which to me means metrics. So let me have a discussion. Where's the catch box? Lovely. Which metrics do you in the room think are the most important for you as businesses to track? Which do you track, or which do you know you should track but you don't really? Who wants to kick off?
Profit per employee.
Profit per employee. And what does that tell you?
It tells you about productivity, and about resource utilisation, and also whether you've got the right team.
Okay, and you measure that simply as what is my profit last month or last year?
Each month.
So each month you sit down and go, okay, what was my profit? Divided by the number of employees or FTEs.
Yep.
And that will give you an idea on how productive your business is.
And the other one is recurring revenue to costs.
What does that tell you?
Well, that's about, is the business continuing to, if the costs are growing in the business and the revenue is growing in the business, are you losing ground or making ground?
So in other words, you would discount from that any upfront revenue? You should go, what's my continuous revenue?
Yep.
And you would aim to keep your business expenses at a proportion of that.
Yep.
Love that. Give us some love. 3, 2, 1. What are some others that people think are important to track? Nigel?
Cost to service the client.
Cost to serve. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
So it's actually the process. So it's from the engagement of the client all
Yep.
through the life cycle of the client. What is the cost?
And why is that so important?
Because if you don't know your cost, you don't know how, it's just cost. You don't know the cost, which means that you could blow out, which means your revenue is lower than expected.
Yeah. The other area is there's a lot of businesses in the industry, particularly those that are in real trouble now, who their cost to serve has been supported by legacy revenue or other income volume bonuses. And the problem right now is as soon as that's been switched off, it's kind of like a friend of mine started a pink bats business back in the day. Yeah, at one point they had 200 staff, and then Peter Garrett, who actually ironically was his hero growing up, he had a midnight oil tattoo on his back, closed the door, and he went bankrupt with $3 million worth of debt. The lesson for me is don't start a business that's being artificially supported by market forces that aren't to do with the market, in other words, the government. Give us some love. 3, 2, 1. What else? Greg, do you have some metrics?
Sum up. Just the ones that I look at just on my smaller business, but I always like to track where my prospects are coming from.
Prospects.
How did they find out about me?
Love that. What was it called? Traffic? Yeah. What I really like for that is also, I do something which I track, trigger. So for example, clearest example I give you is James Williamson. We sat down and analysing his client base, his pipeline. And I noticed there were 5 clients who'd come from the school that his kids were at. And I said, are you not interested in how that happened? We need to find out what's going on there. And sure enough, what had happened is the first parent had come in wanting a self-managed super fund. And James had sat down and gone, what do you want to do? And the outcome at the end of it all has been, you don't need a self-managed super fund. It's too expensive. You need to do this. And what had that parent gone? They'd gone and basically next time they told 4 of the other parents. So the trigger for that whole prospect thing wasn't just the source, it was the reason. But yeah, I think understanding what's going on, because often you've got people out there who are probably better than marketing your business than you are. Give them some love. 3, 2, 1. What's some more? Tim.
Some sort of capacity measure, I think.
Some sort of?
Capacity.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you having your idea of what capacity looks like and how you're tracking to that.
So, for example, you could just do it as easily as if you've got the cost to serve, you could go, average client, it takes me 15 hours to bring on board a new client and 10 hours to manage those over the course of 12 months. I've got 4 employees, which gives me roughly, 7,000 hours a year in the business. And you work backwards from there.
Yeah, well, I was probably even thinking simpler than that, because most businesses are going to try and shrink client numbers and either maintain or increase the revenue. So,
yep. One of the easiest ways to leverage a business is pricing. Cool. Give them some love. 3, 2, 1. Yes. Nice throw. Right.
We're a multidiscipline firm, so it's more tracking how many services each client's using.
Cross number of services? So cross-service penetration, I guess.
Yep.
And what's your range?
Well, it's even if we're just accounting, finance, risk and financial planning, even if it's just as simple as that, aiming to get 2 or 3 and move the ones to at least more than that. So.
It's interesting because if you go on to something like an active campaign, you can set up a scoring system for a number of website hits. And you could turn around and say, what are the stickiest kind of clients? Well, they'd probably be clients who they've got, this one and this one could be worth 30 points, that could be worth 50. You could absolutely gamify it. Give them some love. 3, 2, 1. Any others that come to mind? Yeah.
Retention rate, client satisfaction, measuring that.
Retention rate's a good one.
I'll throw another one out there, compliance, auditing. So it's always crucial in today's world.
Just measure how you feel afterwards. Compliance auditing, yep. Who knows the retention rate off the top of their head? Roughly?
Could estimate.
So, how many clients did you lose last year, on average? 4 out of?
128.
128.
And 12 new. So we know
so you're,
coming in, how many stay, how many
so your attrition rate would be roughly 3%, give or take.
Yeah, but there's also
which means you
start measuring the existing clients moving up.
Which means your customer lifetime value would be 30 years. If your attrition rate is 3%, then your average customer is going to stay with you for 30 years. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that might be the number, but that's not what happens.
Any others?
Client activity. So how many meetings, how many phone calls, how many whatever.
Yep, and what would that tell you?
I suppose how much work it does take to look after a client, or whether you're over servicing or
do you measure that now? Okay, that's one of the hardest ones to measure. Because to do that, you have to get everybody using the system. And I think everybody wants to go, Salesforce is doing a really good job of trying to link in with everything. But the truth is, I think it's really difficult to register every phone call and every email, especially when, digital technology is the latest.
We do it. We run timesheets.
Okay.
And they feed into Explain.
And do you enjoy timesheets?
Sorry?
Do you enjoy doing it?
No.
Okay.
Oh, we do.
How do you, I'm sure most people in the room would want to be hearing.
We've got that. I can tell you each client, and then
can you do? Sorry,
that. It's more what services, I guess the average time it takes.
Would you do us all the benefit of telling us how you manage to maintain the discipline of getting everybody to do them? Because all it takes is one person to go, screw this, I'm not doing it.
There's no choice.
So how's there no choice?
So basically it's just a simple Excel that's been designed, and you just have categories, so drop down box. So it's either a client task or an admin task.
So when do you do it as a team? Do you do it together? Do you do it individually?
No, everyone has their own, so you basically open it up, and a lot of professions do it. This is not
they do
new.
But when do
accountants, lawyers,
they do. Even then, I'm working with the accounting firm right now, and they've had to put a real focus on timesheets. 7
minutes blocks or whatever, however they do.
So when do you do it? When do people sit down and do it? Does it change, differ, or is there a time?
No. So basically, you just do it as you go. So you change activities and you do it, and there might be, if you've in 5 minutes touched, 4 different clients, just general client services.
Okay.
So that might be just a general category. If you're doing anything less than 5 or 10 minutes, because it's the increments on one client, then you track it. But if you're doing in 5 minutes, so it might be marketing, it'll be so it'll be the client, and then it'll be the category. Is it for the self-managed super fund? Is it estate planning? Is it Centrelink?
The work you do, is there a lot of it that's done on online, on web applications?
We use Explain for everything, like tasks, threads, diary, when I say everything.
Because there's some cool
timesheets on there.
There's tools like Rescue Time can actually track which application you're doing. I don't know if it can do it at a client level. But I know there's some plugins like Teamwork's got a timing tracker, which you can actually log on and log off and it'll pop up. So it's interesting. Give them some love. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Can I share with you some metrics? Have you seen the magic metrics before? Who's seen the magic metrics? I love this. This is actually something I was first shown by Jack. I love it because it kind of shows you how powerful it can be if you just track 5 metrics. So imagine you're tracking leads, right? And so let's say you got 24 leads coming in a year. Your conversion rate is 74%. That gives you 18 clients a year. Fair enough? Let's say your engagement fee is $4,000, which gives you a total revenue from new clients of $72,000. You with me? Let's say your profit on that is 30%, which means your total profit after everything is $21,600, and you retain those clients on average for 10 years, which means the total value of this business, if you're assuming that's an annual fee as well, is $210,600. Makes sense so far? Now, what if we added 10% at each stage? What do you think the impact of that would be on these numbers? Should we see? So you bring in 27 leads instead of 24, which is you add sort of 3. Your conversion rate goes up to 82.5. Maybe you get better at the engagement process, your marketing's better, you weed out. You now have 22 clients instead of 18, just by increasing these two by 10%. You with me so far? It's 22% increase. You increase your engagement fees by 10%, or your engagement annual, 44. Your new revenue number is 96,800. That's an increase of 34%. Still with me? You increase your profit by 3% by looking to decrease some of those costs. You've now got your profit is 31,944. That's a 48% increase in your profitability. If you can then retain each of those clients for a year longer, your total revenue generated over the course of that is 350, which gives you a 67% increase in the end number. It's pretty impressive. Let's have a bit of a brainstorm. What could you do in the next year to increase your lead flow by 10%? Try out some ideas. Your lead flow? You could start a blog. You could spend another day, just a day a month, going out and building partnerships. You could commit to a fortnightly call with your current partners. You could write one blog a month and put it out there. You could go and ask for 10, make a commitment as a team to ask for 10 client referrals a month. Go out and find one new referral partner and just work it. You with me? Conversion rate. What could you do to increase your conversion rate by 10%?
Improve the process.
Improve your process. You could sit down and master the closing part. You could implement the 15-minute phone call at the beginning. You could go out and actually be very clear, get the referral brief off the members site and give it to your partners so they know exactly the clients you can help, exactly the problems. You could go and train your partners if you've got internal people, you can go and train them on a regular basis, have a quarterly training session where you sit down and unpack, if they're going to be the ones referring, unpack case studies and things like that. With me? Visual tools, which work pretty well. The Pelf Pyramid. What could you do? What would you need to change to increase all your new advice fees by 10%?
Bring your invoices.
You could change your hourly rate. You could start a pricing committee and keep everybody, really to it. You create a system where you literally can't log in a certain amount number under a certain level. It goes, computer says no, that sort of thing. You with me? You could do some work on pricing. What about profit? What could you do to decrease your cost by 3%?
Get rid of some useless software.
Do a software, just cull. That's a way of doing it. Yeah, get rid of, what do you mean I don't need Netflix and Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon? No. Anything else? There's a bunch of stuff you can do to decrease costs, yeah. What could you do to reduce attrition by 1%? More loving. Let us know list. Fortnightly briefs. Yeah, paint the future. Get a better review process. Constantly be clear about what the next step is. Is this useful? First time I saw this, I was like, oh my God. Because you think I've got to overhaul everything, but this sort of made me look at it and go, if you just do incremental tiny changes, I can give you the slide deck if you like. It makes all the difference. And I think if there's people, sorry? Another way of looking at Matt, I know you've been part of the dashboard. Tim, I know you and I have done this as well. We launched this about a month ago, and I absolutely understand why nobody's jumped on it, because it's something I wanted to talk about. There's a section of the member site called the dashboard. And if you go in there, we're playing with it. Essentially, once you put your numbers in there, it will update live and it'll give you a view of where you sit in comparison to everyone else. Can I just quickly ask, is anyone really, really happy? Like they have absolutely no problem with putting certain numbers up in front of other people on the program so they're openly visible? Everybody? Because the reason I asked that question is I don't want to turn around and say, who's got a problem putting the numbers out there, because that puts you on the spot. But if you do have a problem, for whatever reason, you don't want people to see certain numbers, or you don't want to have that comparative thing, just come and let me know, because I'd love to understand why that is. Because if you don't want to do that for that reason, that's cool. But what I did is I looked at it and I went, one of the problems with a lot of dashboard metrics is they require you to go through and create all this data, right? And I know unless you're tracking some of that data, you're kind of comparing rubbish in, rubbish out. I know Jim used to do a great report, but I was at Hillross when we were doing this, and I know that a lot of the information that businesses put in was just made up on the spot. I reckon this is the metrics we came up with to analyze. Firstly, lead flow. Every month, I'd love you to just go in there and go, how many active referral partners do I currently have? And on top of that, how many leads did I get in the last 30 days from my partners, from my clients, from your personal network, and from online sources? And within the tool, that enables us to create a bar chart where it compares not only the number of leads everybody's getting each month, but also where they're coming from. Do you remember we had that conversation about 2 accelerators ago where we did that straw poll of where leads were coming from? And we uncovered most leads come from client referrals, but a growing number come from online. And I know everybody in the room found that incredibly useful because it sort of primed everybody to realize where the trends were. Online, it measures 2 things. How many website hits did you get last month? And how many new subscribers? And there's interplay between the 2. How many people know how many website hits they got last month? How many have got who's got a mailing list that people sign up for? Okay. There's a real link between the 2. For example, if you got a lot of hits and nobody's signing up for your mailing list, you've either got no lead magnet to download, in which case you're not getting it, or whoever's hitting your website is not getting what they want at that point in time, in which case you look at the lead magnet, you look at the content. If you're getting a low amount of hits and you're getting lots of subscribers, guess what? You should be paying for traffic. Is that cool? Is this useful? This one, new advice. This is a monitoring where it will go, this is the total clients everybody's got in the pipeline. So you've got 10 people in the pipeline. 3 of those came in the last month. And by the way, there's 7 who completed. We can compare 2 things from that. Firstly, where the seasonal stuff is coming along, and also who's struggling with turnarounds or who's got really good turnaround times. And you can also get a sense of whether your turnaround times are from month to month are slow or fast. Active ongoing clients, new ongoing clients, and attrition, obvious reasons. Project progress is the one I'm really keen on, because at the end of this 2 days, everyone's going to leave with a project, and it'd be good to check in every month and go, are you at 60%, 50%, and see where other people are at. This one, Carolyn, I totally agree with you. This is, for me, is the best measure of productivity. And whether we go profit, the number of FTEs in your team, whether you got 4.5, how many active advisors that made up, and last month's revenue or profit. Interestingly, you can create a bar chart which shows you how big your team is, how big your monthly revenue is, and the size of the bubble will tell you how productive you are. And sometimes it can show that big businesses are not always more productive than small businesses, and you can start to get that insight. Is this helpful? Full-time employees. So it's corporate speak, which is, in other words, a full-time employee is 1, part-time is 0.5, 3 days a week is 0.6. Tim?
Is the idea to update this each month?
Ideally, yeah. I mean, I'm happy to run a drop-in. It's a really simple, the whole questionnaire that's actually in there takes about 5 minutes. And I tried to keep it really, really simple. Anyway, I want to share that. So if you are kind of like, I don't know what metrics to track, I don't track anything, this is a really easy way of having it done for you. Is that cool? The second area we talked about is systems. Long time ago, maybe 5 years ago, I joined a program called The Entourage, run by this gentleman, Jack Delosa. Has anyone heard of Jack? Yeah, he's kind of think of him as Tony Robbins, but shrank to a miniature size, which is a horrible thing to say, but it's kind of true. Jack is actually one of the best sellers from stage I've ever seen. He started doing this when he was 19. In actual fact, Michael Gajewski met him when he was 19 at uni, when he used to run classes for people who wanted to go out and pick up. That was how he started. But he's an incredibly smart guy. I joined the Entourage and I worked with the Entourage. I actually quit it after about 6 months. It just wasn't the right program. But a couple of times I'd come in to do a coaching session with my coach and I got to sit down with Jack. And Jack is incredibly smart. He's incredibly bright. And one of the things I took from Jack is right from the very start, he was sitting down and creating operating manuals in Google Sites. And to the level of granularity, he literally had a process to explain to somebody where the post office was so they could post letters. And it was this attitude towards sitting down and getting all the information out of his head that I thought was really valuable. Not to mention kind of a lot of what I learned there formed the basis for what you would know as the system for designing systems and online operations manuals, all this sort of stuff. This is a model I really like from the Sherlaw's days. There's lots of different ways of cutting it. I wanted to show it very quickly. And it talks about sort of the value that's created in business. And most businesses are down here at the benchmark, a basic business. What takes a business from sort of a basic benchmark business to a higher level tends to be the talent or the expertise or certain aspects of the team that you've got. Would you agree with that? If you take it up a next level, it tends to be either systems or some sort of penetration into a niche. That's where the value sort of increases. Next level up, it usually becomes IP or the ownership of a specific product. Then it's about distribution or captured audience, brand, and then finally you get to the Branson level, where you're kind of a franchise in disguise. So there's sort of 4 guiding principles, and I want to dive into a couple of them really quickly. Technology is the top of the tree. And I'm going to come back to that, and we're going to spend a bit of time on this, because I think technology is one of those areas that everybody's interested in. Everybody wants to hear from everybody else, and everybody wants to not go down the right route, right? Wrong route. Should we do a bit of how? I did this exercise with the Financial Wisdom guys the other day, because we were sat there having this conversation, and there's one lady turned around to me and she said, I've been at this company for 12 years and I'm about to be shifted out. I'm going to have to find a new job. How am I going to find a job? And I sat there and I said, this sounds like a purpose thing. It sounds like we need to change that story you're telling yourself in your head. And the one thing I've noticed about a lot of elite performers is they tend to have a story. Have you noticed that? When you go and see them speak, they have a story. Whether they crafted that story from the beginning, they have a story to tell. And what I wanted to do is a live exercise with you now, and then I'm going to get you to do this personally. Is that cool? So what I want to do is I want to create a character between us all, a super advisor. And I want us collectively to craft a story. By the way, the more ridiculous the story, the more on the edge this is going to be this is going to be great, okay? So our super advisor is whatever he or she looks like, and I want to look at a couple of different areas. So I really need your input for this to work. So let's jump in. You can follow me. So there's 3 components to kind of elite positioning. And this is all about being able to position yourself, whether in the business, to yourself, whether when you're marketing. I think it's really important to get the hang of. There's 3 parts to it. One is the story of you, or the story of our hero. The second is the story about the advice you give. And the third is the stuff you do for the people you want to work with. Does that make sense so far? Okay. Step 1. I think every great story begins with a journey, an origin story, right? Batman Begins, falls down a cliff, bats everywhere, killed by the Joker, Krypton, that sort of stuff. Tell me about this amazing advisor we got. What's his or her story? Where did she or he began his or her career? Shoot it out. Do you want me to kick you off? In the mailroom. Began the career in the mailroom. You've got mail. What else? What happened then? Got a job as a trader, 18th of October, 1987. Yeah? Job as a trader, 18th of October, 1987. What else? Progressed through the business, became a CFA. Yeah? Anything else we want to pop in there? Hit by a meteorite. Radiation rays turned them into a mathematical genius. You with me? Who's got a story that they could really tell about how they started, how they got going, where they came from? Nobody? I think everybody would, right? Okay. So tell us about this mythical person. What's the thing they consider themselves to be an expert in? The example I've given in the book, which is on page 14 if you're looking for inspiration, is I've become an expert in diagnosing the financial mistakes that stop people from attaining financial independence. What about our superhero here? What's the expertise what do they consider themselves to be an expert in? I'm going to start picking people. Sorry? People. They're an expert at people. What about people?
They read them, they know them.
Reading people.
Understand them.
Beautiful. And knowing them. And what does that help them do?
Help people.
Which helps them.
Help people succeed in life.
Helps them to understand themselves better. Beautiful. And what are they passionate about? The example I put in the book is this person is passionate. Actually, it's more than that. It's not just passionate. It's obsessive. Like when you've got something you're obsessive about, I always like to deal with people who are obsessive. Actually, when I advertised for Jen's role, I actually put all the stuff there and I said, somebody who is mildly obsessive compulsive about organization would be a definite benefit. So this character I put in here, they're obsessive about numbers and possibilities. And they love crunching through strategies. So what about this character we're creating? What are they obsessive about? They're obsessive about numbers. What else? What about the numbers? Yeah? They run through more scenarios than in a single pound. Beautiful. So we've got a character so far who, has got a good, strong track record. They're an expert in reading people and they know how to help people. And their obsessive thing is the numbers. They're able to combine those 2 things and really crunch through them. Is that useful? Okay. Now let's talk about the advice. Everybody needs a bit of proof of what they can do. Do we agree? So in the book, I put down one of my longest ongoing clients who I met when they were deep in debt, now travel the world constantly, and have just helped their kids with their first home. That's pretty good proof of concept, right? What about our hero here? What's the proof of what they did? Tim, help me out here.
Yeah, I think, well, why don't we say one of my longest ongoing clients who has now just retired and living a great life.
Cool.
Not quite exciting enough.
How about I've taken 20 clients from getting by to the retirement of their dreams in the last 10 years? Yeah? You with me so far? The next thing is a metaphor. What's it like? The example I gave in the book is, you know what? I'm like a fixer out of a Tarantino movie without the violence. People bring me in, I calmly assess the situation, and I lead them to better times. Who would like to be a fixer? So what about this character here? What's the metaphor? Well, they're really good at reading people, and they're really good at the numbers, and they're really good at getting a result. You could say they're a bit like an empath out of Star Trek. In other words, you read the emotional situation, then you tell the captain how to act. Maybe that's a metaphor we might want to use. You might want to turn around and say, I'm like the calmest person on the bridge. And everybody's losing their head, I'll be like, everyone just chill out. I've got this. You with me? The last bit is, and this is a really important one, what makes me unique? Everybody in this room has got some element of what you do that makes you absolutely unique. The angle you got differently. The angle of this character here is I've been doing this so long and at such depth, I can now see the strategic direction the strategies often before I've even modeled them. Who could put up their hand and say they've got a bit of that in them? Yeah. It's gut instinct. And then I crunch the numbers just to follow it up. You with me? Shall I just run through the rest of the book?
So I can see your problems before you.
Love it. What's the difference is I can see your problems before you can. And then I'm great at explaining them in a way that makes you realize what they are. Beautiful. So the final bit, now you've got the advice piece, and you can really define what it is about your advice that makes you elite or better or different. The final bit is the them, and it starts with, what are the solutions you can do? Well, some of the things I can do is help you sort out your debt. I can get your cash flow under control. I can find the best investment vehicle for a person straight off the bat. I can help them make better decisions. I can structure things correctly, and I can bring in the right expert when needed. Yeah? Problems. What are the issues you help remove? Include uncertainty, regret. That's a big one. Fear of making decisions or mistakes, getting seduced by the wrong things, or bad advice, or fixing the bad advice that you followed. And finally, the purpose. In this case, the example I've given is the purpose behind this person is my parents struggled financially, and it ended up being a terrible mark on their lives. If I can prevent that in as many families as I can, I'll be preventing that from happening for others. Is this helpful? Would you be comfortable spending 15, 20 minutes going through and creating one for yourself? Yeah? Okay. I want to spend a bit of time on this because I think it's really, really important for everyone to leave very clear on what it is about you that makes you an elite performer, what it is about your advice that makes it unique and special and valuable, and specifically what it is about what you do and the impact it has on your clients. Is that cool? Hey, did anyone really struggle with the metaphor? A couple of people did. Okay, should we give a bit of a help with the metaphor? Because I reckon between us, there's a few people. So, George.
No, I struggled.
Yeah, I know. So tell us what you're trying to communicate through the metaphor. What is the skill or the angle or the things that you can do for people that make you really, really good?
Well, I guess I do want to plagiarise yours, which is basically you come in and fix things because people are stuck. And we get a lot of referrals from accountants that have their clients that are just stuck. They don't know who can help them.
Okay. So you want a metaphor that's like Mr. Wolf in Tarantino in Pulp Fiction?
Yep.
How I've seen the wolf, but not the wolf. So someone who can't come in.
I like the wolf.
I like the wolf as well. I like that. Pretty, please. Get me a coffee with sugar in it. So what's the metaphors? Somebody who comes in, calmly assesses the situation, reads the emotional, what's going on, thinks about what practically needs to happen, and then takes control of the situation. It's like, it's like, I love it. Think of me like a human keep calm and carry on symbol. What's another one? Anyone read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Don't panic. That's the cover of the book. I'm like the money version of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I've got everything you need to know. I can tell you how to get through it. But step one, don't panic, because I never do. That might be a good one. Any others? Oh, you got one? Ooh.
So I have special insight based on decades of experience and knowledge, like Gandalf, without the beard, shows up just at the right time and can show you the way forward.
Love it. Give us some love. 3, 2, 1. Oh, you want to pull out your money and put it in Bitcoin. Thou shalt not pass. You said you wanted some help with the metaphor. What are you trying to get across in part of your metaphor?
Yeah, it's similar to the solving the problems and deliver calmly, etc. But also really trying to help my clients understand what I'm teaching them, so they understand the advice that I'm giving them.
Okay, and what is it about the way that you deliver that education that makes it you?
Good question. It's probably the manner that I do it, I suppose, is the best way that they can. Yoda.
And what is it about Yoda that makes him a good teacher?
He's a good teacher. He's calm and he's not doing it from a point of arrogance, but just.
There we go. So I'm like Yoda. I'm going to teach you. I will do it from a position of arrogance, and I'm going to make it fun. What is another metaphor we could use there? Yeah, great, go on.
I was just thinking about being the navigator in the car next to him, but I've come out with a little, after talking this, it says, I'm your financial sat-nav.
Love it. Give him some love. 3, 2, 1. That's a hell of a throw, by the way. Is that helpful? What else could you do as a educational thing? I'm like the best teacher you ever had. Not the one who used to fall asleep in class, or the one who used to bore the crap out of you. The one you come out of the lesson thinking, I really like that guy because he treats me like a person, and he's just told me a story I'll remember for the rest of my life. Who remembers the best of a teacher? Yeah, everybody does. I had two. One, Mrs. Brown, who was my business studies teacher. I emailed her about 4 years ago, and I was like, hey, I just have to tell you, my best teacher ever, and look what I do now. And Mr. Molsey, who was my history teacher, who used to swear a lot and tell stories about Henry VIII being a drunken, boozy fella. And now I just remember Henry VIII now, so it's cool. Okay, what I'd love you to do is everybody, how are we feeling about our stories? You feeling pretty good? Good. Because remember that thing we talked about, unshakable belief, clarity of why, clarity of purpose. This is what this exercise is aiming for. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to tell your story to someone else in this room. And the way we're going to do this in a minute is you're just going to stand up, not right now, in a minute, and I want you to wander over to somebody and say, hey, my name is Stuart. Do you mind if I tell you a little bit about what makes me a great advisor or a great office manager or a great coach or whatever your thing is, or a great implementer? My journey began, blah, 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 blah. I consider myself to be an expert in this, and this, and I'm obsessive about this. One of the areas or one of the demonstrations of what I can do is best articulated by proof. And people tell me, or I like to think of myself, I'm a bit like a wolf or a sat-nav. I guess what makes me unique, or the thing that makes me particularly useful, is this skill. Some of the things I can do for people are solutions, and the problems I help solve off the back of it. And the real point of what I do is this, and this. Would you do that? And when you're listening to this on the other hand, and the person's finished, I'd love you to turn to them and go, you know what I really like about that? Is this bit. That really resonated with me, as did this. And then when you've received that information, I want you to just make a note of it. And then return the favor. Introduce yourself, go through the whole process, and then give that little bit of feedback. Is that cool? Okay, everybody stand up. And feel free to grab a partner, whoever you want. There's no constraints here. We'll have a bit of background music. Aisha, that's cool. Did you find that a useful exercise to run through? Yeah? I mean, I really think when you talk to, and I've spoken to people like Alicia, Michael Groom is another one I've managed to do a speaking gig with, which is incredibly interesting. The clarity with which they can talk about their story, where they came from, what they're good at, and explain it, I think is one of the differentiators. Does anybody, metaphors seem to be the one thing that pops up time and time and gets a bit challenging. Yeah?
So, would you talk about this in your first meeting? Was it just put your head around it?
The most important thing for this is to get this right in your head. This is the story you need to tell yourself. You remember that whole, the passion, the desire, the clarity of what you are, the the behavior, the awareness, all that. This is really a story for you. Now, if it comes up in conversation and you've already got this embedded in your DNA and it's hard-coded, it's going to be very easy for you to answer the question. Like I remember first time I came back from traveling, I had to go and see, I just joined Elixir and I had to go and see Peter Daly of AFS. Does anyone know Peter? Peter he was running AFS at the time. Peter was a very traditional South African guy, big, lovely tie, very really traditional. And he just ate young guys like me for breakfast. And he came in and you could see he didn't like me straight away. But the question he said after a little while, he said, why should I let you anywhere near my planners? And I didn't have this story in my head. I ran through the story about 500 times in the week that followed. But I guess when someone asks you the question and you can go, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is my story, this is the benefits, because that to me is the difference between somebody who is kind of on the journey to what's the difference between somebody that, when you speak to sports people who are good at what they do, they just take it as a given that you know that they're good, right? Helpful? There's a whole bunch of frameworks that we could talk about. And when we get down to the planning, if you want to chat through any of the content on the program, on the member site, anything I can help you with around this stuff, which we're going to cover off, some of the stuff on the program around productivity, around planning out your diary, about communicating, delegating. We've already talked about some of the stuff around metrics, around business intelligence, systems. I love systems. How to build an online operations, how to structure your client engagement process, how to do your review, and technology we're going to talk about in just a second. But I think one final area I wanted to touch on is if you open your book to page 18, some of you are already really good at this. You're really good at the communication piece. Some people get challenged with it a bit. And I wanted to put forward a model that it kind of is based on an old book called Death by Meeting. But we've kind of, you've seen it before? Yeah. I've kind of modified it and added a bit in there. And one of the things I've seen, I'm actually working with a friend of mine who he's a developer by trade, and he and 4 other mates decided to buy a childcare centre because they thought it would be passive income. Yeah. And I sat down with him about a month ago. He's like, I need your help. Please come in and help us with this. And I said, first problem is, how on earth did you think looking after other people's kids was ever going to be passive? Anyway, so firstly, we did, to cut me long story short, we've sacked the director because she was creating all sorts of problems. We've got back to the basics, and they've actually gone straight back to the purpose. They're now having conversations with the staff about why the childcare centre is this, why they're doing this, what they want to do. And the next phase is they're communicating with each other via email. Like the number of emails I'm getting through, CC this, CC that, every thought. They're talking about strategy, all of it. And I just email them all. I said, I'm not going to email you guys anymore. We're having a meeting when I get back from this. We need to sort this out because communication is a real challenge. I think this is a really great model for getting the communication in the business. And it's based around the idea that you want to communicate in 4 different ways. In the last 9 months, 6 months in particular, I've done a daily Eisenhower matrix every day because it's daily. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes. I think you do something different, similar. Whenever I come in the morning, daily, funny that. And I'll show you that in a second. It's the first thing I do when I come in the door. It's fast and I do it really focused. And it really specifically enables me to understand what my activities for the day are going to be, what my priorities are, and what I need to brief other people to do for me in order to make progress. I'm going to talk you through it in a second. The second level is the weekly debrief. Who does a weekly debrief for the team already? A few people do. Okay, great. This runs for about 45 to 90 minutes. Jen and I do it on a Friday. And the interesting thing about this is we talk about weekly activities. We resolve any issues that have come up during the week. And finally, we report on the metrics that are really relevant. You'll notice here the moment a strategic issue pops up, we go, we're not talking about this now. We put it on a list of things to talk about later. Because what happens is when strategic issues come up at the weekly debrief, it's gone. The whole point of it is to debrief progress, not attack things. Monthly, Jen and I sit down and we spend 2 to 4 hours, usually on a Friday afternoon, and we grab that list. Firstly, we discuss, analyze, brainstorm all of the issues affecting our long-term success, and then we make a decision. And generally, we'll have this list that comes from here, but we'll actually grade it. We'll go, what are the most important things to talk about? And we limit it to 1 to 2 topics. Make sense? And then every quarter, is where I do the quarterly think tank, which is literally I get away for 3 days, far away from mobile reception as I possibly can. Day 1 is just chill the hell out, let my brain just... Day 2 is go for bushwalks and get lost because I overestimated the bushwalk. That happened last time. And then by the day 3, you actually sit down and start writing out what's going to happen. And most productive 3 days of the quarter. And you notice the key thing is I don't do it in the office. I don't do it around. Is this helpful? Those of you, look, I've given you the template in there. If you're familiar with the Eisenhower matrix, you'll already know a bit about it. But I just want to run through it, those who don't. Dwight Eisenhower created this. US President, General. And essentially what you do, first thing you come in the morning, before you get on your email, before you do any of this stuff, you'd go, what have I got to do today? And the first thing you do is you go, which of the stuff I've got on my list is urgent and which is not? And Eisenhower is really specific. Urgent is specifically defined as anything that needs to happen today, tomorrow at the latest. If it doesn't have to happen today or tomorrow, it's not urgent. Does that make sense? The second part is he goes, what is the stuff that I need to do? And what is the stuff that if I actually sat it down and I gave someone a good brief, they'd be able to do it for me? And you split it that way. Does that make sense? What you've got left there is generally, that's the stuff that you want to do straight off the bat. You don't pick up the phone, you don't answer your emails. That is the stuff you do to begin the day. And if you get this right, you also maybe jump on a morning brief with the team. You go, Jen, Dave, Sue, Alan, whatever, I need you to do this. Here's the purpose of it. Here's the things you might need to do. And here's the level of delegation. If you've done the delegation brief with me, you'll know 5 levels of delegation. And communicating, is this level 1, do exactly what I've said. I've done the research, I don't want you to deviate. Or is it the level 5, which is just go and get it done. I don't care how you do it. Just don't make me look like an idiot. So that, by the way, if you go through that list, generally in most cases, you'll be done by lunchtime. Have you ever had that experience where you get all of your urgent stuff done by lunchtime? How does it feel? Feels great. You've never had it? Do you start off the day by doing the urgent things, or do you start by doing other things? Exactly, and that's the problem. And then what happens, you get about 3 o'clock and you go, I've got to do my urgent stuff. And so you're rushing the adrenaline, and that's a horrible way to end the day because you get home and you go, wine, please. I do anyway. The second level is you've got your important stuff. It's not urgent, doesn't need to be done today or tomorrow. And you can break that into 2 things. Eisenhower explained anything that is important is either something that will solve a problem that is holding you back or move your business forward in such a way that generates a benefit. Doing your pricing. Writing out your marketing campaign for the next 90 days. The stuff that goes in here, you'd schedule in your diary. So in other words, you would go, okay, I need to do my marketing plan for the next 90 days. That's going to take me 4 hours. Where am I going to do it? I'll do it in a cafe. And you go, when am I going to do it? I'm going to block it in my diary a week tomorrow. So what that means is this stuff never becomes urgent, never becomes late, and you commit time to it in advance, which means that your diary tends to work around it. Does that make sense? The other important thing is with this stuff, the temptation sometimes, like the gym appointment, your temptation will be to put it in there and go, I'm in the flow. You can't do that. You've got to actually respect the decision you made. Anything that sits down here is either not important right now and not urgent. This is where your R&D list sits. And to be honest, if something never switches from here to here, there's a good chance it actually isn't what your business needs. It's a bright idea. Is that helpful? I've also wanted to put a structure into, if you're having the weekly debrief. So this is how Jen and I do it every week, and it works really well. We start off with a lightning round. Okay, Jen, give me the top 3 things on your plate. I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Great. Top 3 things on my plate are this, this, this. Fantastic. And the idea is really, really quickly. The next step is, okay, let's go through and do a bit of a scoreboard. What's the core focus on everyone's plate right now? What are the specific objectives we're trying to do? And how are we going? We're trying to get the marketing going. The objectives were to get it out every week. How do we do this week? Yep, we got it out on target. Great. So then we go, okay, what do we need to, then after we've been through that, we go, what do we need to talk about today? We put everything down. I'd like to talk about the CRM. I'd like to talk about workflow. I'd like to talk about the weather. I'd like to talk about, and we go, what's the most important thing to run? And you put that first. Second most important, so you define the order. Anything that comes up, Stu, I think we should probably think about launching a new program. I'll go, no, that's a strategic issue. Let's talk about that at the monthly thing. And then at the end of it, we'll go, okay, great meeting, 45 minutes are up. What's the decision? What are we going to do? Who's going to do it? When are we going to do it? Where? And who else do we need to tell? And that's the structure we follow every single week, and it keeps us on track. So there you have it. There's another episode of the Finnovator done and dusted. I hope you got something out of it. I hope the idea of elite performance didn't upset you too much. Hey, as always, if you're interested in a little bit more, we actually maintain a library of every single of these podcasts that I've ever done via our Practice Success community platform, which is free for anybody to join. You can jump on board at success.audere.com.au. In actual fact, all of the podcasts were originally recorded as webinars. So you can jump in and, I guess, have a look at the visual side of things as well. I usually make notes and sometimes we even share some stuff that might be useful. And there's a whole bunch of other goodies on there as well. As always, thank you so much for listening. And if you love the podcast, take a moment just to leave some feedback. Otherwise, I will see you soon for another episode of The Finnovator. See you.